The morning sun rose over Tarkesh, spilling gold and amber across the jagged cliffs and barren valleys. Daniel Mercer stirred, muscles sore but his mind sharp. The journey through the valley had tested every lesson Karenis had taught him: patience, observation, awareness, and courage. Yet now, as they stood together on the ridge overlooking the settlement below, he felt a sense of readiness he had never known before. He was no longer just a survivor. He was a human who could think, anticipate, and act with purpose. Karenis adjusted the strap of her armor, her amber eyes scanning the distant structures. She was calm, yet Daniel could sense the tension that came from experience and instinct. Every detail mattered: the movement of shadows, the position of buildings, the patterns of light that could conceal or reveal. "The settlement below," Karenis said quietly, "may offer the supplies and information we need. But we must approach carefully. They are wary of strangers, and Tarkesh has taught them to distrust those who appear unexpectedly." Daniel nodded. "I understand. Observation first, interaction later." Karenis gave a small nod, approving his words. "Good. You are learning quickly. Remember, your strength is not only in your body but in your mind and in your choices. Use all of it." They began their descent into the valley, moving through the ruins and rocky outcrops with quiet precision. Daniel mirrored Karenis's every motion, crouching behind rocks, pausing when she paused, keeping silent and deliberate. He felt a strange exhilaration in this careful, controlled movement. For the first time, he understood the rhythm of survival, not just reacting to danger, but shaping it through awareness and planning. As they approached the settlement, Daniel could see more clearly the people moving among the structures, humans and aliens alike, gathering supplies, repairing equipment, and tending to small gardens and energy sources. They were focused on survival, yet their coordination lacked the precision and instinct that Karenis had instilled in him. He realized that this was a test of not just skill, but of understanding human nature and behavior in a way that could influence the outcome. Karenis crouched behind a low wall, pointing toward a building at the edge of the settlement. "There is information there," she whispered. "Perhaps messages, navigation data, or records left by those who came before. If we reach it, we may find a way to contact your people, or at least gain an advantage in what comes next." Daniel nodded, taking a deep breath. "Then we move carefully." Together they advanced, keeping to the shadows and avoiding the attention of those below. Daniel felt the weight of every choice. Each step, each pause, each glance could make the difference between success and exposure. But he had learned to trust himself, to anticipate outcomes, and to rely on the instincts Karenis had nurtured. They reached the building Karenis had indicated. The entrance was partially blocked by debris, but Karenis cleared a path silently, motioning for Daniel to follow. Inside, the air was cooler, filled with the faint hum of old energy systems and the scent of dust and metal. Crates and equipment were stacked along the walls, and in the center, a control panel flickered with residual power. Karenis examined the panel carefully, her fingers moving over the controls with skillful precision. Daniel watched, absorbing the process. This was not just technical skill. It was understanding, anticipation, and adaptation. Every move was calculated, every choice purposeful. "Human," Karenis said, looking at him. "Observe. The panel holds information, but it is encrypted and partially damaged. You must think, anticipate, and act with logic. Use what you have learned." Daniel nodded, approaching the panel. He studied the interface, noting patterns, sequences, and inconsistencies. He remembered Karenis's lessons: patience, observation, and deliberate action. Slowly, methodically, he began to work through the system, bypassing damaged circuits, interpreting incomplete data, and aligning the remaining sequences. Hours passed, and Daniel felt his mind sharpen with focus. He was aware of Karenis's presence, the quiet strength she offered, and the unspoken trust between them. Finally, with a soft hum and a flicker of light, the system activated, revealing maps, communication logs, and navigation data. Karenis studied the information, nodding. "Well done, human. You have proven that your mind can overcome obstacles not through strength alone, but through understanding and persistence. That is what sets your species apart." Daniel felt a surge of pride. "We did it together," he said softly. Karenis's amber eyes softened, and she allowed herself a faint smile. "Yes, together. That is important. Survival is not only about individual skill, but also about trust and cooperation. With the information in hand, they planned their next move. The data revealed a route off Tarkesh, as well as the locations of other settlements and resources. Daniel realized that this knowledge could save not just him, but others who might become stranded in this harsh world. As they prepared to leave, the faint sound of movement reached them. A group of scavengers had noticed their presence and was moving toward the building. Karinis placed a hand on Daniel's shoulder, guiding him behind a stack of crates. "Do not panic," she whispered. "Observe. Use what you have learned. The choice to act with awareness will determine the outcome." Daniel nodded, feeling the lessons of the past days crystallize in his mind. He watched the group carefully, noting their movements, anticipating their decisions, and preparing to act at the precise moment. When the scavengers approached the crates, Daniel signaled to Karinis, and together they moved swiftly and silently, avoiding detection and reaching the exit without confrontation. Outside, the air was crisp, carrying the scent of dust and minerals. The sun was low, casting long shadows across the valley. Daniel felt a sense of accomplishment and calm. They had navigated Tarkesh, obtained vital information, and survived the scrutiny of others, all without relying on force or conflict. Karinis led him along the mapped route, moving with the same quiet precision that had guided them throughout their journey. Daniel followed closely, feeling a deep sense of trust and understanding. He realized that human ingenuity, courage, and adaptability were as valuable as any physical strength. As they reached the edge of a cliff overlooking a vast canyon, Karinis paused, scanning the terrain. "The next stage is challenging," she said. "The canyon is deep, the paths narrow, but with careful planning and cooperation you can navigate it." Daniel nodded, ready for the challenge. He had learned to trust his instincts, to observe and plan, and to act with awareness. Tarkesh had tested him, but it had also shown him the strength of his mind and spirit. They descended into the canyon carefully, moving along narrow ledges and rocky paths. The wind whistled through the cliffs and the sun cast dramatic shadows that made the terrain appear more treacherous than it was. Daniel relied on Karinis' guidance, but he also applied his own observations, choosing footholds, anticipating shifts in sand, and moving with deliberate care. Hours later, they reached a wide, flat area at the bottom of the canyon. There, remnants of an old landing pad and energy beacon glimmered faintly in the fading light. Daniel realized that this was the final stage of their journey on Tarkesh. The beacon could transmit a signal strong enough to reach human outposts and perhaps even rescue ships. Karinis examined the equipment carefully, noting damage and wear. "We can repair this," she said. "It will take focus, skill, and cooperation. Are you ready, human?" Daniel nodded. "Yes, let's do it." They worked together, Karinis guiding him through the complex systems, teaching him how to manipulate the circuits, realign power flows, and restore functionality. Daniel applied all he had learned: patience, observation, logical thinking, and determination. Hours passed, but they did not falter. Finally, the beacon hummed to life, sending a signal across Tarkesh and into the stars. Daniel felt a surge of triumph and relief. They had done it, not through violence or confrontation, but through skill, intelligence, and cooperation. Karinis placed a hand on his shoulder, her amber eyes reflecting pride. "You have done more than survive, human. You have learned, adapted, and prevailed. That is what makes your species remarkable." Daniel smiled, feeling a deep sense of connection and accomplishment. "I couldn't have done it without you." Karinis allowed herself a faint smile. "Perhaps, but the choice, the courage, and the determination were yours. Remember that, human. You carry the spark to endure and inspire." As night fell over Tarkesh, Daniel and Karinis sat beside the beacon, watching the stars emerge one by one. The wind whispered through the canyon, carrying dust and echoes of the planet's past. Yet within that small illuminated area, there was quiet achievement and hope. Daniel realized that Tarkesh had tested him not only in body, but in mind and spirit. He had learned to survive, to observe, and to act with intelligence. He had discovered the value of trust, cooperation, and courage. And he had proven to himself and to Karinis that humanity could endure even in the harshest worlds. Karinis turned to him, her voice soft and steady. "You are no longer merely a human who survives. You are a human who thrives. Never forget that." Daniel nodded, feeling the truth of her words. The journey had changed him. Tarkesh had been harsh, lonely, and demanding, but it had also revealed the strength of his spirit, the depth of human ingenuity, and the power of cooperation and trust. The next day, the convergence resumed with a much more formal air. Daniel woke early in his modest quarters aboard the orbital station, a strange mix of anticipation and nervousness tightening his chest. He had spent the previous evening replaying every moment from the day before, the crushing realization that humanity was overlooked, the strange thrill of being singled out by the Zetherian queen, and the weight of being the focus of countless alien eyes. Even now he could feel the subtle echo of her voice in his mind. Observe carefully, and those who dare to challenge it. He dressed quickly, choosing a simple human suit rather than trying to mimic the elaborate attire of other delegates. Subtlety would be his ally. Standing out too much might draw unwanted scrutiny. As he walked through the corridors of the station, Daniel noticed the curious stares of other delegates. Many whispered among themselves, and some even slowed their pace to glance at him more closely. He caught fragments of languages he could not understand, but the tone was unmistakable. Interest, confusion, and perhaps a touch of caution. When he arrived at the hall, the atmosphere had shifted. The previous day's events had rippled through the gathering like a stone tossed into a still pond. Delegates who had ignored humanity now regarded Daniel with a new awareness, while others seemed to study him like one might examine a rare specimen. He realized that sitting next to the Zetherian queen had made him a symbol, a wild card whose presence could unsettle the carefully maintained order of centuries-old empires. Queen Sarathis was already in her seat, her many eyes scanning the hall with a calculated intensity. When she noticed Daniel, she inclined her head slightly, a gesture that conveyed both acknowledgement and expectation. She did not speak immediately, allowing him to approach and settle in his chair before addressing him. The subtle vibrations of her presence filled the space around him, and Daniel felt the familiar mix of awe and intimidation. "You survived the first day without incident," the queen said at last, her voice soft but carrying a resonance that made him lean in closer. "Tell me, human, what do you know of our ways?" Daniel paused, aware that any answer could set the tone for the entire session. "I know very little," he admitted honestly. "I have observed, I have listened, and I have tried to understand. I hope that is enough to begin." Sarathis's eyes narrowed in thought as though weighing his words against some invisible scale. Then slowly she tilted her head, and a faint vibration of amusement passed through her. "It is enough for now. Observation is the first step. The second is endurance. You will see that the convergence tests more than knowledge. It tests spirit." Daniel's stomach tightened. He had expected diplomacy, speeches, and negotiations. But tests of spirit? The queen's words hinted at challenges far beyond what he had anticipated. Yet beneath the fear, a spark of curiosity ignited. Humans were good at enduring, at finding solutions where others saw only obstacles. Perhaps this was the moment to prove that. The first session of the day was a formal debate among the most influential species. Daniel listened closely as representatives from the Zentari Coalition, the Vrith Alliance, and the Lumerian Conclave exchanged words in rapid succession. Their communication was a blend of speech, color, and subtle physical movements, each gesture conveying layers of meaning. Daniel strained to follow, taking careful notes on tone, inflection, and reaction. He realized quickly that understanding these nuances could make or break humanity's reputation. Occasionally, a delegate would glance at him with what seemed like incredulity. They were accustomed to humans being outsiders, predictable, weak, and easily dismissed. Yet here he sat, beside one of the galaxy's most feared rulers, and they could not ignore him. The realization both thrilled and unsettled him. After the debate, the queen leaned toward him, her presence a soft hum that seemed to vibrate through his bones. "The first test is simple," she said. "Observe and learn. But be aware, not all lessons are spoken. Some are hidden in the behavior of others. Watch closely, human, and you may survive the day." Daniel nodded, though he had no idea what she truly meant. As the session continued, he began to notice subtle patterns. Certain species leaned forward when discussing strategy. Others maintained rigid posture to signal authority. Some whispered in ways that seemed meaningless at first, but on closer observation, he realized these whispers coordinated movements, alliances, and hidden intentions. During a break, Daniel wandered the hall cautiously. He had hoped to find some quiet space to gather his thoughts, but the hall was crowded. and every corner was filled with alien eyes. Delegates approached him with polite curiosity, some smiling with sharp teeth, others with multiple eyes blinking in rhythm. Each interaction was an unspoken puzzle, a chance to learn or to misstep. Then a small group of creatures approached him, their forms delicate and almost ethereal, wings like spun glass catching the light. "You are the human," one said, her voice melodic and accented with clicks. "The one the Zetherian queen chose." "Yes," Daniel replied cautiously, unsure of what to say. "Hi, Shim. You are bold sitting beside her," another added. "Few would dare and fewer would survive. We watch with interest." Daniel felt a mix of pride and pressure. The words reminded him that his actions reflected not just on himself, but on all of humanity. He had never considered that sitting in a chair could carry such weight, yet here it was. Every step, every gesture, every word had potential consequences. As the day progressed, the Queen called him closer once more. She led him to a private observation chamber, overlooking the hall below. "Human," she said, "you will now witness a demonstration of power. Many come here thinking might is all that matters, but understanding is equally important. Watch carefully." Below them, a group of delegates began a display of telekinetic skill, bending energy fields into intricate shapes that shimmered in the light. Daniel's eyes widened as he saw objects lift, spin, and dance in perfect synchrony, each movement conveying authority, intent, and even emotion. Yet what struck him most was the subtle mistakes, the tiny hesitations that revealed vulnerability. Even the most skilled delegates were imperfect. "Notice the flaws," the Queen instructed. "Even the powerful can falter. Observation allows you to see beyond strength. Adaptability and insight. These are the true marks of survival." Daniel nodded, absorbing the lesson. He realized that human advantage lay not in raw power but in perception, in creativity, in the ability to improvise. If he could learn to read the intentions of others, to anticipate moves, he might indeed survive, and perhaps even thrive, among beings far more advanced than humans. By the time the session ended, Daniel was mentally exhausted. Yet the Queen's presence beside him, steady and commanding, had given him a strange reassurance. He understood now that her choice to sit him at her side was deliberate. She saw potential where others saw weakness, curiosity where others saw simplicity, endurance where others saw fragility. As delegates began to leave, Daniel felt a gentle touch on his arm. The Queen's hand rested there, a subtle reminder of her attention. "The day is not yet done," she said softly. "Opportunities appear when least expected. Prepare yourself. Tomorrow will demand more than observation. It will demand action." Daniel swallowed hard, excitement and fear warring within him. Action. He had survived the first day through careful observation and restraint, but the thought of taking initiative in a hall filled with beings capable of unimaginable feats was daunting. Yet he also felt a spark of determination. Humanity had been given a chance, a seat beside the most powerful ruler in the galaxy. He would not squander it. As he walked back to his quarters, Daniel reflected on what he had learned. The convergence was more than a gathering. It was a living test, a challenge of perception, endurance, and courage. Sitting beside the Queen had given him visibility, but it had also placed a burden on his shoulders. Every action would be scrutinized, every decision potentially life-altering. That night, Daniel lay awake, replaying the lessons of the day. He thought of the subtle patterns, the small mistakes, the hidden alliances, and the Queen's words. Adaptability and insight. These are the true marks of survival. He realized that survival in this hall would not be about power, wealth, or influence. It would be about understanding, creativity, and the ability to respond to unexpected challenges. And deep down, Daniel felt a quiet pride. Humanity was underestimated, often dismissed, and yet here he was, seated beside a being whose power spanned millennia. The journey ahead would be difficult, but for the first time, he believed that humans might not just survive, they might matter. The next morning, he would face whatever the Queen had planned, armed with observation, insight, and an unshakable determination. Sitting beside her was no longer merely an honor. It was a responsibility, a test, and perhaps the first step toward proving that humanity belonged among the stars. The morning light filtered through the crystalline panels of the observation chamber, casting patterns of shifting colors across the floor. Daniel Mercer woke with a sense of anticipation mixed with anxiety. The previous days had been overwhelming, but he had survived through careful observation and cautious interaction. Today, however, he had a feeling the Zetharian Queen intended to push him further. Her words from last night echoed in his mind. Tomorrow will demand more than observation. It will demand action. He dressed quickly, choosing the same simple suit he had worn before. There was a quiet strength in simplicity, he reminded himself. A reminder that humanity's advantage was often subtle and unexpected. Stepping out into the hall, he noticed the other delegates moving with their usual mix of purpose and arrogance. Yet there was a difference today. Whispers followed him, glances lingered, and even the most powerful species seemed curious about the human who dared to sit beside the Queen. As he approached the main chamber, the Queen was already there, seated with her usual calm authority. Her multiple eyes scanned the room, and when they landed on Daniel, he felt the same vibration of expectation he had felt the first day. She extended one of her hands, delicate and powerful at once. "Human," she said, "today you will face a challenge. Not of diplomacy, not of etiquette, but of your spirit. You will see that endurance alone is not enough. Insight, adaptability, and courage will be tested." Daniel swallowed, his throat dry. He had been preparing for observation, for listening and understanding, but now he realized he would have to act. I will do my best," he said, voice steady despite the fluttering in his chest. "Your best will suffice," she replied. "Follow me." The Queen led him through corridors he had never noticed before. They passed chambers filled with glowing artifacts, strange devices and species he had never seen. Daniel's senses were overwhelmed, but he kept his focus. He had learned quickly that distractions could be dangerous here. Even an accidental misstep or poorly timed glance could be interpreted as disrespect. Eventually, they arrived at a large arena, circular and surrounded by seats filled with delegates eager to watch. At first, Daniel thought it was a demonstration space, a place for performances, but as he looked closer, he realized it was a testing ground, designed for trials both physical and mental. The floor was smooth, reflective and glowing faintly with energy that pulsed in rhythm with the Queen's presence. "You will face 3 challenges," the Queen announced, her voice carrying to every corner of the arena. "The first is observation and strategy, the second is adaptability and problem-solving, and the third will test your courage and integrity. Many have failed the first 2 before reaching the last. Few succeed." Daniel felt a surge of determination. Humans had always faced challenges, sometimes insurmountable ones, and yet they survived. He would not falter now, he nodded. "I understand." The first challenge began immediately. Holographic images appeared in the arena, forming intricate patterns and sequences that moved with increasing speed. Each sequence represented a scenario of interstellar conflict, requiring decisions about diplomacy, resource allocation, and alliances. Daniel studied the patterns carefully, remembering the Queen's words about observation. Slowly, he began to recognize the hidden logic behind the chaos. Where others might have panicked or acted rashly, he analyzed, predicted outcomes, and chose responses that balanced risk with opportunity. Delegates watched in silence, some leaning forward with interest, others exchanging confused glances. Humans were known for impulsiveness, but Daniel's methodical approach surprised even the most seasoned observers. After what felt like hours, though it was likely minutes, the sequences ceased, and a subtle vibration of approval emanated from the Queen. "You observed well," she said. "Many would have failed. Few would have noticed the hidden cues that revealed the correct paths. You have passed the first trial." Relief washed over him, but Daniel knew the next challenges would not be so straightforward. The second trial began with a sudden shift in the arena's environment. The smooth floor transformed into an irregular terrain, filled with obstacles, moving platforms, and shifting barriers. The task was simple in explanation but difficult in execution. Reach the center of the arena without stepping into the hazardous zones that glowed faintly beneath the surface. Daniel's first instinct was hesitation, but he remembered the Queen's guidance. Observation alone would not suffice. He had to adapt. He studied the patterns of movement, noticing the subtle rhythm of the shifting platforms. With careful timing, he leaped, balanced, and navigated the obstacles, each step requiring both precision and judgment. Twice he nearly slipped, but instinct and quick thinking saved him. The audience murmured in astonishment. Some delegates whispered in admiration, while others, particularly those who prided themselves on agility and physical prowess, exchanged looks of disbelief. A human, they seemed to be saying, could succeed where more advanced species might fail. As he reached the center, a small holographic interface appeared, displaying a puzzle that required rapid problem-solving and memory. Daniel focused, recalling sequences, symbols, and connections he had observed during his earlier interactions. Piece by piece, he solved the puzzle, his mind working like a machine honed by years of learning, improvising, and overcoming unexpected challenges. A soft glow surrounded him, signaling the successful completion of the second trial. The Queen's gaze was steady, but a faint shimmer of approval passed through her many eyes. Adaptation and intellect, she said. You are learning the qualities that make humans intriguing. Daniel allowed himself a brief moment to catch his breath. He had passed 2 trials, yet he knew the final challenge would be the most demanding. The Queen gestured for him to follow her to a smaller, more intimate chamber at the arena's edge. This final trial, she said, will test not only your mind and body, but your heart. Decisions here will reflect your values, your courage, and your willingness to uphold integrity, even when faced with immense pressure. Many would compromise, many would falter. You must choose wisely. The chamber transformed around them, creating a scenario that mimicked a complex political crisis. Multiple alien delegates appeared as holograms, representing different factions with conflicting interests. Daniel was presented with a series of choices that could sway alliances, manipulate resources, and even shift the balance of power. He realized that each decision carried weight, and even a small mistake could have long-reaching consequences. Daniel paused, considering the implications. He could act selfishly, choosing the easiest path that ensured temporary success, or he could consider fairness, compromise, and the greater good. The choice was difficult, but he remembered humanity's strengths, empathy, creativity, and the courage to make decisions that might not guarantee immediate reward but honored principles. He began to speak, making decisions that balance competing interests, finding innovative solutions to satisfy multiple parties, and demonstrating patience where others might have forced outcomes. The holograms reacted in real time, negotiating, adapting, and sometimes resisting, but Daniel's reasoning held firm. Slowly, the scenario reached resolution, with alliances strengthened, conflicts minimized, and trust restored among the delegates. The chamber returned to normal, and the Queen's presence filled the space with quiet power. You have done well, she said. Courage, wisdom, and integrity, these are the qualities that elevate humanity. You have proven that you are more than mere survival. You are capable of shaping outcomes, of inspiring others, and of earning respect in a galaxy that often underestimates you. Daniel felt a deep sense of relief and pride. The trials had tested him in ways he had never imagined, and he had discovered strengths within himself that he had not fully recognized. Yet beneath the triumph, a new awareness settled in. These challenges were only the beginning. The convergence was a living, breathing entity of power and complexity, and humanity's place within it was still fragile. As the Queen led him back to his seat beside her, Daniel noticed subtle changes in the hall. Delegates who had doubted humanity now regarded him with cautious respect. Whispers of admiration and curiosity passed through the crowd, and he realized that his actions had ripple effects far beyond the trials themselves. Sitting beside the Queen, he had become not just a participant but a symbol of human potential. The rest of the day continued with formal discussions, speeches, and debates. Daniel participated carefully, applying lessons from the trials. Observe closely, adapt quickly, and act with integrity. Each interaction reinforced his understanding that humans, though young in galactic terms, possessed qualities that could surprise, inspire, and influence. By the end of the day, Daniel was exhausted but exhilarated. He had faced challenges that tested mind, body, and spirit, and he had emerged stronger, wiser, and more confident. Sitting beside the Queen, he allowed himself a small moment of reflection. Humanity had been underestimated, but he had demonstrated that they were capable of more than any observer had predicted. The Queen leaned toward him as the hall began to empty. "Today you have shown resilience, insight, and courage," she said. "Remember this, human. The galaxy respects those who act with..." The morning of the 4th day of the convergence arrived with a hum of tension that Daniel could feel even before leaving his quarters. Overnight rumors had spread among the delegates. Whispers of the human who had survived trials set by the Zetherian queen. Some species reacted with curiosity, others with suspicion, and a few with thinly veiled disdain. Humanity's sudden visibility had disrupted the carefully maintained balance of power, and Daniel sensed the undercurrent of challenge that flowed through the hall. He dressed quickly, selecting his usual simple attire. Even in a place full of alien extravagance, he had learned that subtlety and consistency could be just as effective as bold displays. As he moved through the corridors, he noticed delegations consulting each other in hurried whispers, sending occasional glances his way. The weight of attention settled heavily on his shoulders. Sitting beside the queen had given him opportunity, but it also painted a target on his back. When he entered the main hall, the queen was already waiting. Her presence radiated authority, a force that seemed to move the very air around her. She regarded him with a mixture of curiosity and expectation. "Today," she said, "you will face the complexities of interstellar politics. Observation and endurance will no longer suffice. Now you must act, influence, and navigate challenges that test judgment, diplomacy, and insight." Daniel nodded, understanding the gravity of the moment. His first step would be to engage with other delegates without causing offense, while also demonstrating humanity's intelligence and adaptability. He took a deep breath and stepped into the center of the hall, where representatives from dozens of species had already gathered. The first challenge of the day began almost immediately. A simulated political crisis was projected in the center of the chamber. Two powerful empires, the Zentari Coalition and the Lumerian Conclave, were on the brink of dispute over the rights to a newly discovered energy resource. The simulation required Daniel to mediate discussions, prevent escalation, and propose solutions that balanced competing interests. At first, delegates reacted with mild amusement. "A human," one Vrith representative whispered, "thinks he can manage the affairs of empires." Daniel ignored the murmurs, focusing on reading the subtle cues of each participant. He observed gestures, shifts in posture, and tonal inflections that suggested priorities and hidden intentions. Drawing on lessons from the previous trials, Daniel approached the scenario with care. He acknowledged each faction's concerns, presented logical compromises, and highlighted opportunities for mutual benefit. Slowly the room's energy shifted. Skeptical glances softened, whispers of doubt turned into murmurs of consideration, and even the most rigid delegates began to engage with his proposals. By the time the first simulation concluded, Daniel had not only prevented conflict, but had also proposed a strategy that optimized the distribution of resources in a way that satisfied multiple parties. A subtle ripple of approval spread through the hall, and the queen inclined her head slightly, signaling her recognition. The next phase of the day was even more demanding. Delegates were allowed to challenge each other, questioning decisions, probing logic, and testing the limits of influence. Daniel faced pointed questions and indirect criticisms. He remained composed, carefully listening, responding with clarity and ensuring that his reasoning was transparent. He used logic, empathy, and creativity to navigate arguments, sometimes turning potential confrontations into opportunities for collaboration. One exchange stood out. A Vrith diplomat, known for their sharp wit and aggressive negotiation style, attempted to corner him with a series of rapid questions, each designed to expose gaps in his knowledge. Daniel paused, listening carefully, then responded with a solution that addressed the concerns while also introducing a subtle advantage for humanity, a minor, yet noticeable shift in influence that respected all parties while subtly asserting human ingenuity. The room went silent for a moment, delegates exchanging surprised glances. Then slowly, approval rippled through some corners. The queen's eyes gleamed with interest. Daniel realized that he had succeeded not through dominance but through insight, patience, and an understanding of behavior that many species underestimated. By midday, Daniel had navigated several rounds of challenges, each more complex than the last. Delegates began approaching him directly, seeking his advice on minor disputes, testing his reactions, and gauging his reasoning. Daniel found that by remaining calm, observant, and principled, he could gain influence without overstepping boundaries, a balance that was crucial in a gathering where a single misstep could provoke offense or provoke conflict. After the sessions, The Queen led him to a smaller, secluded chamber for private discussion. "You have shown promise," she said. "Many species are curious about humanity now. Some with admiration, some with skepticism. But influence alone is not enough. The true test lies in leadership under uncertainty. Today I will place you in a scenario where consequences are real, where choices reflect character." Daniel's heart beat faster. Up until now he had faced simulations and controlled challenges. Real stakes, the Queen implied, meant that decisions could affect more than outcomes in a holographic projection. They could impact perceptions, alliances, and trust among real delegates. The chamber transformed again, creating a multifaceted scenario. A sudden dispute had erupted between two mid-tier species over trade routes critical to their economies. The situation was delicate. If handled poorly, it could spiral into a larger conflict. Daniel was expected to mediate, propose solutions, and maintain order, all while other delegates observed and judged his actions. He approached the task with care, analyzing both the explicit statements and the subtle cues of each participant. By addressing both practical concerns and underlying motivations, he crafted a solution that encouraged compromise without appearing biased. One species proposed a bold alternative plan, which initially seemed risky, but Daniel carefully evaluated it and incorporated elements that reduced risk while maximizing mutual benefit. The resolution impressed many delegates. Some approached him afterward to discuss ideas while others quietly observed, their expressions a mix of curiosity and respect. Daniel felt a surge of quiet pride. Humanity, often underestimated, had begun to demonstrate capability not through raw power, but through intellect, strategy, and empathy. Yet the day was far from over. As the final sessions began, the Queen introduced a scenario that combined multiple elements: negotiation, observation, strategy, and improvisation. Delegates were presented with a sudden disruption in the simulated galactic economy, with critical resources suddenly limited and alliances strained. Daniel was expected to respond in real time, making decisions that balanced competing interests while navigating unpredictable challenges. He focused, recalling every lesson from the past days. Observe carefully, adapt quickly, act with integrity, and maintain clarity under pressure. He anticipated reactions, adjusted proposals on the fly, and offered solutions that preserved stability while subtly advancing human influence. Delegates who had initially doubted him now watched with genuine attention, some even nodding in agreement at his proposals. As the scenario concluded, the Queen's gaze fell on him once more. "You have navigated uncertainty with remarkable clarity," she said. "Many species would falter, seeking immediate advantage or personal gain. You have demonstrated patience, wisdom, and the ability to see beyond the immediate. These qualities are rare, and they mark humanity as outworthy." Daniel allowed himself a small moment of relief, though he knew this was not the end. Influence, respect, and recognition could be fragile in a gathering of such complexity. Yet he had learned that even subtle actions, grounded in principle and insight, could shift perceptions and create opportunities. Humanity had begun to carve a place in the convergence, not by force but by intelligence and character. As the day ended, delegates began to depart, some lingering to exchange notes, discuss outcomes, and offer cautious praise. Daniel observed each interaction, understanding that alliances and impressions were forming all around him. The Queen remained seated, her presence a constant reminder of the stakes and the potential rewards of continued success. Walking back to his quarters, Daniel reflected on the day's events. He had faced simulations, challenges, and real-time negotiations, all under the scrutiny of the galaxy's most powerful beings. He had succeeded not through dominance or intimidation, but through careful observation, strategic thinking, and unwavering principles. That evening, as he prepared for rest, he realized a profound truth. Humanity's strength lay not in sheer power, but in adaptability, insight, and integrity. These qualities, often underestimated, allowed humans to navigate complexity, inspire trust, and influence outcomes in ways that many species had never anticipated. The Queen's words echoed once more. The true test lies in leadership under uncertainty. Daniel understood now that this was more than a trial of skill. It was a test of character. And in the quiet of his quarters, he felt a deep sense of readiness. Humanity had taken steps that few could have imagined, and while challenges still lay ahead, he knew that they were capable of meeting them. The convergence was not merely a gathering of species. It was a living test of intellect. The final day of the galactic convergence arrived with a tense energy that seemed to vibrate through every corner of the massive hall. Daniel Mercer woke early, feeling the weight of the past days settle on his shoulders. He had survived trials, navigated simulations, and proved humanity's adaptability, intelligence, and courage. Now the moment of culmination had arrived. The Queen's gaze, always present beside him, carried both expectation and anticipation. As he entered the grand hall, Daniel noticed the difference immediately. Delegates moved with quiet curiosity, their previous whispers replaced by cautious respect. The simulations, trials, and interventions had left a mark. Humans were no longer an overlooked species. They were a presence to be considered, a potential pivot in the delicate web of interstellar politics. The Queen's decision to seat him beside her had become a statement in itself, one that commanded attention, even from the most powerful empires. The opening address of the day began with a formal speech from the Council's chair, a figure of immense authority and tradition. Delegates presented reports, debated strategies, and discussed interstellar alliances, but the focus often returned to Daniel. Each glance, each subtle nod indicated that his presence was no longer incidental. He was a participant, a symbol of human potential, and for some, a wildcard whose actions could shift outcomes in unpredictable ways. Queen Serathis leaned toward him and whispered, her voice a soft vibration that resonated in his chest. Today, human, you will demonstrate not only what your species is capable of, but also why it deserves a permanent seat at the table. You will speak, act, and make decisions that shape perception. The galaxy watches. Fail and you vanish into obscurity. Succeed and you alter the course of history. Daniel nodded, feeling both fear and determination. He understood now that this was not just a trial. It was the culmination of everything humanity had learned, everything they had endured. The path forward required careful observation, diplomacy, courage, and the willingness to stand firm in principle, even in the face of immense pressure. The first task came swiftly. The Council presented a dispute that had been simmering for decades between the Vreath Alliance and the Lumerian Conclave. Resources critical to both factions had become limited, and tensions were escalating rapidly. Delegates exchanged heated arguments, their gestures and colors signaling both aggression and negotiation. Daniel had to intervene, finding a solution that would satisfy both parties without appearing biased or weak. Drawing upon everything he had learned, Daniel approached the scenario methodically. He listened to each side, acknowledged their concerns, and proposed compromises that balanced interests while introducing innovative ideas for cooperation. He suggested shared resource management systems, equitable trade agreements, and joint research projects that could strengthen both factions. The room went silent as delegates considered his proposals. Humans were known for unpredictability, and Daniel's solution had elements that no species had considered. Slowly, approval began to ripple through the assembly. Delegates nodded, whispered to each other, and in some cases approached Daniel to discuss details. The subtle shift in energy was palpable. Humanity had not only survived scrutiny, but had influenced outcomes in a meaningful, positive way. Next came a series of rapid, real-time challenges. Delegates were encouraged to test one another's proposals, presenting hypothetical crises, economic disruptions, and interstellar emergencies. Daniel remained composed, applying logic, observation, and empathy to navigate each situation. He adapted quickly, proposing solutions that preserved stability while demonstrating creative problem-solving. His ability to remain calm under pressure and his insistence on integrity impressed many delegates, including some of the most skeptical observers. By midday, the atmosphere had changed entirely. Delegates who had once dismissed humanity now treated Daniel with cautious respect. Even the most powerful and traditional species could not ignore the effectiveness, intelligence, and adaptability he displayed. Humans were no longer perceived as weak or insignificant. They were unpredictable in ways that could influence alliances and outcomes, a quality that both intrigued and unsettled the galaxy's long-established powers. The Queen called him aside for a private discussion. Before the final assembly session, "You have demonstrated skill, insight, and integrity," she said. Now comes the final step. He will speak before the full assembly, not as a representative of Earth alone, but as a voice for humanity. Your words, your presence, and your choices will decide whether humans are acknowledged as equals in this council. Daniel felt a surge of nerves, but also determination. He had prepared carefully, but the weight of expectation was immense. Yet sitting beside the Queen, he felt an unspoken support that strengthened his resolve. This was humanity's chance to move from observation to recognition, from presence to influence. The chamber fell silent as he stepped forward to address the assembly. Thousands of eyes across species and forms focused on him. He began in a calm, steady voice. "Honored delegates, I stand before you not to claim superiority, but to demonstrate that humanity has the ability to contribute meaningfully to this council. We are young, we are adaptable, and we have endured challenges that have shaped us into a species capable of insight, innovation, and cooperation." He spoke of human resilience, the ability to learn quickly, to adapt to unforeseen challenges, and to find solutions where others might see only obstacles. He reminded the assembly of the lessons they had witnessed over the past days. Humans had observed, adapted, and acted with both intelligence and integrity. Some delegates shifted uncomfortably, surprised by the clarity and sincerity of his words. Others leaned in, intrigued by the perspective of a species long underestimated. Daniel continued, emphasizing that humans sought not dominance but collaboration, not disruption but innovation. "We ask not for special privilege," he said, "but for the opportunity to contribute, to demonstrate that our unpredictability can serve as a strength, not a liability." A murmur passed through the chamber. The Queen's presence beside him reinforced his credibility, her eyes fixed on him with a calm intensity. Daniel could feel the weight of the moment. The next reactions would determine whether humanity's presence would be respected or dismissed. Questions came from delegates across the assembly, probing ideas, testing logic, and challenging assumptions. Daniel answered each with clarity, patience, and insight. He acknowledged concerns honestly, adapted to new information, and remained consistent in his principles. His responses reflected not only knowledge but integrity, reinforcing the message that humanity could be trusted to act responsibly and with foresight. By the afternoon, the mood had shifted. Delegates were consulting each other, nodding and recognizing the value of human perspective. A few species, long skeptical of newcomers, expressed admiration quietly, while others began to propose collaborative initiatives that included humanity in meaningful ways. The subtle influence of Daniel's words and actions rippled through the chamber, slowly reshaping perceptions. Finally, the Queen rose to speak. Her many eyes scanned the assembly, commanding attention effortlessly. "Delegates," she said, her voice carrying authority and resonance. "You have witnessed the trials, the guidance, and the actions of humanity over these days. This species, though young, has demonstrated qualities that are rare and valuable: endurance, insight, adaptability, and integrity. They have faced challenges that would have defeated many others, and they have emerged not only capable but deserving of recognition." A hush fell over the chamber. Daniel felt the weight of the moment, the culmination of days of observation, trial, and action. The Queen's declaration carried authority that few could dispute. Slowly, one by one, delegates began to nod, acknowledging her judgment. The murmurs of curiosity transformed into expressions of respect. Humanity's presence had been validated. The final step was ceremonial but symbolic. The Queen extended a hand, gesturing toward a reserved area at the center of the chamber. "Daniel Mercer," she announced, "and by extension humanity, are hereby recognized as full participants in this council. You have earned a permanent seat at the table, not through force or intimidation, but through intellect, integrity, and courage." Daniel's heart surged. He moved to the designated area, standing beside the Queen as delegates observed with respect and acknowledgement. The weight of responsibility settled on his shoulders, but it was tempered by pride and a sense of achievement. Humanity had arrived not as a minor player, but as a recognized force capable of contributing meaningfully to the galaxy's future. Delegates approached to offer congratulations, share ideas, and discuss potential collaborations. Daniel realized that the influence humanity had begun to exert would grow over time. The trials, the challenges, and the observations had demonstrated not only survival, but potential, capability, and promise. As the session concluded, the Queen turned to him once more. "You have done well," she said, her voice calm but resonant. "Humanity is now acknowledged as a species capable of influence and collaboration. Remember this, human. The journey continues, and with each choice, each action, you shape not only your own future but the perception of your people across the stars."